Hey guys, welcome to Word of Advice TV. You're probably here because you turned on your thermostat to cooling and all you heard was crickets. Absolutely nothing. Or maybe you did hear something. Something turned on, it felt like it was running, and a couple hours later, you noticed something. It is not getting cooler in your house. In fact, now that you think about it, it's getting much hotter. And believe me, I know how you feel. It's about 90 degrees in Minnesota, and at my job where I work, we're getting killed with AC calls. We're backed up by probably about a week. But anyways, the more you fix these things, the more you start developing a process or a method of how to pinpoint what's going on with your AC. And that is what I want to share with you. I'm going to try to help you figure out what's going on with your AC and what you can do to fix it. Before I begin this video, I just want to say this is a pretty long video. I cover pretty much everything about the AC. So if you want to go to something more specific, just look in the description and I'll put the times when I start talking about different things so you can jump to that if you need to. Although this is all really good information, so if you have the time, I suggest watching the whole thing. One common fix is that during the winter, the condenser fan motor will lock up a little bit. And what that will look like is you'll come outside, your compressor is running, it might even be steaming up because it's overheating, but the fan is not spinning. So all you gotta do is take a screwdriver or a nut driver or a long stick, reach in through the grates and give your fan a spin so that the scoops are scooping the air up, or the scoops are facing down the fan blades. So you just give it a spin while it's running, and a lot of times it'll take right off. Now before you go and start taking everything apart, first let's use our powers of observation. Go to your thermostat, turn on your cooling. What happens? When you turn it on, does your fan inside start working at the furnace? Can you feel air blowing out of the vents? When you go outside, is the fan here spinning? Can you hear the compressor rumbling? Depending on what you find, that will determine where you will start troubleshooting. If you feel no air coming out of your vents and the motor inside of your furnace is not spinning, you will start inside. If it is working and there's air blowing out, then you're better off starting outside. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, so let's go ahead and start inside. And if your air inside is working, it's okay, you can come along too. You should know this stuff too anyway. The first place you want to start is your thermostat, especially if you don't feel any air coming from your vents, or if you recently replaced your thermostat, then there's a chance that something may have been wired wrong. Also, if you have a programmable thermostat, that program in the background might be the thing that's messing with you. So an easy way to bypass that, just to see if it's a program or not, if you don't know how to program it, just look it up. I guess I'm not going to spend this video showing you how to program, but see how it says hold right there? There should be a hold button on your thermostat if you have a programmable one. Just make sure it says hold. If it's on program, you won't see that hold button. It'll just be like that. It'll show you the time, the set points, and what it is in the house. So you turn it down to whatever you want. Let's say we want 70. Then you press hold. You should see hold somewhere on the screen. And what that means is that any program that's in the background will be overridden and it'll hold the set point that you set it to. In my case, it'll be 70 all the time. Also, quite a few thermostats have batteries in them. So this whole thermostat should come right off the ball. There's a base and then there's the thermostat itself. The thermostat should come off the base. Just look around it for any clips or where it holds on. I know mine has two hook type of latches on top of here, and you pull it down from the bottom and it comes out like that. And as you can see, so the thermostat comes out and there's your base with the low voltage thermostat wires right here. And if your thermostat has batteries, a lot of times they'll either be on this side, or sometimes you pop off this lid and they come out. My thermostat does not have any batteries. As you can see, it went blank when I took it off. If you have batteries and you take it off, it'll stay on. My thermostat actually has power directly from the furnace, and it has a common wire. So just so you know, R is power, Y is cooling, blue is typically common, white or W is heat, and G is fan. And also, an important thing to note is if you have RH and RC, or just R and RC, R is power, but RC is power for cooling. You have to have a jumper in between R and RC. Since R is power, if you do not have that jumper in there, your AC will not work. So a lot of times people will put in a new thermostat and they won't put that jumper in there. And they do this when it's furnace season, and by the time AC season comes around, nothing works. If you need further explanation of how this wiring works, you can ask me in the comments below. But that's that. So the first thing you want to do in your AC troubleshooting is go to your thermostat and your fan, turn it from auto to on. There's only two settings on the fan. It's either auto or on. Auto means it turns on with the AC, turns off with the AC. On means that it's just on 24/7. So turn the fan to on and just listen. Does your fan in the furnace come on? Can you feel the air coming out of the vents? Or just go down to your furnace and listen there. If your fan comes on, then most likely your thermostat is good and nothing's wrong inside. But just to double check, we can go downstairs and look at the furnace as well. So you checked your thermostat, and let's say that nothing is turning on inside or outside. In that case, you would start down here. The first thing you want to do is check your breaker panel. See if you have power to the furnace. See if that breaker is tripped. In fact, you know what? Since we're talking about breakers, let's just go take a quick look at our breaker panel just so I can explain a little bit about what's going on there. So just very quickly on breakers, they should be labeled. Hopefully they are. The furnace is going to be 120 volts, so it's going to be a single breaker, and most of the time AC breakers, since they're 240 volts, will be a 2-pole breaker. It'll either be 2 small breakers connected together, or it'll just be 1 big handle. If a breaker is tripped, it'll be in the middle position. So here we have on is to the left, off is to the right, like that for example, and if it's tripped, it'll actually be right in the middle. So a trip breaker is pretty easy to spot. So if you do have a trip breaker and you come down and open this thing, it'll be stuck in the middle. You can try resetting it, turning it back on, and see if that's all you needed. If it trips again, then something else is going on. Okay, so you checked your breaker is not tripped for the furnace or AC. You have power. In that case, you open up your doors and look for the control board in your furnace. Usually it's going to be in the bottom. Sometimes, once in a while, the furnace will have the control board up on top. So just take both doors off and look for the control board. Once you find it, look for a fuse. It almost looks like a little car fuse, you know, one of those plug-in ones. And see if that's tripped. My control board does not have a fuse, so that would actually never happen in my case, but in my job I see this a lot. Oh, actually I found it. Usually it's going to be in the control board. In my case it's just hanging out like this. And you can actually see that little wire inside of there. It's not burnt out. If nothing is working for you, chances are that this thing will be burnt out. So you got to change the fuse out, but the thing is, most likely that fuse burnt out for a reason. That means something is going on. There's probably a short somewhere, most likely outside at the AC unit, at the wires. Maybe there's some bare wires that might have chewed up. Or it's rare, but sometimes the board itself could be bad too. If you suspect that your board is bad, just let me know in the comments below. I could walk you through how you can narrow it down and make sure that that's indeed your problem. And remember those thermostat wires we looked at on the thermostat? Those go down all the way to the furnace, and we actually have a very similar strip. Most control boards will have a very similar strip, just like that, on the bottom of the control board or on the side, which are labeled the same way and should be the same wires. So once again, Y is cooling, W is heat, G is fan, R is power. Alright, so long story short, if your fuse is tripped, you can replace it. If you go and buy some fuses, make sure you buy a box of them. Chances are you replace it, you turn your furnace back on, it'll trip right away again. That means you indeed do have a short somewhere. And if you have a short, one way to try to pinpoint where it's at is to take off all those thermostat wires from the control board and put them on one at a time after you replace the fuse. With the power on, it's 24 volts. Just do it carefully and see which wire trips that fuse as you're putting it on. Chances are it's going to be coming from outside, some kind of short or bare wire outside. Now, if you check your fuse and everything is good, your blower fan is not working though, but you hear the unit outside working, turn off your power and just reach into your blower motor. Try to reach in with your hand. Be careful because the blades could be a little sharp. Reach in with your hand and try to give that wheel a spin. You're not going to be able to see that on camera, but if you take your bottom door off and reach in, you'll be able to see that, feel that wheel. Give it a spin. If it's very crunchy, feels like it's seized up, in that case you will need to replace your blower motor. I have a video of how to replace the blower motor. If you want, you can check that out. I'll put that in the description below as well. If your motor is seized up, you do have to replace that motor before we go any further. And also, a lot of times this is neglected, but this is really the most common problem people have for furnace and AC, is a very plugged up filter. Your filter is always going to be a shouldn't say always, but most of the time will be on the side of the furnace on the return ductwork, either on this side or this side. Sometimes it'll be inside the furnace door itself. Just take the bottom door and look. Check your filter, make sure that's not super dirty. If it is, replace that, and maybe that's all that your problem is. And just so you know, there's arrows on it. They are directional. See how it says airflow and then it shows arrow that way? The arrow will always be pointing towards the furnace or towards the blower motor. And last but not least, there is a coil right on top of the furnace. Almost looks like a letter A. Behind this metal, sheet metal here, behind the plenum, there's a coil that's actually part of the air conditioner as well. The freon inside the system goes between the outside unit and this one in a loop. It just keeps going around and around and around. So these two pipes are actually your freon pipes. And then right here, all the condensation or humidity that's pulling out of your house is going to go down the drain fitting right here. And sometimes this drain fitting will get plugged up. If that ever happens, you can just take this hose off. Try blowing through the hose first. See if you can blow through it easily. If you can't, then you might need to get some compressed air and blow that out, or pour some bleach solution down it. And then also you can take this fitting all the way off and clean any debris that's in there as well. And what that would look like is everything is working fine. It's cooling the house, but you have water just running down all over the sides of your furnace. Also, if your AC is working but you think it's not cooling quite well, everything seems to be working. The fan's working inside, the outside unit's working. It seems to be cooling but not quite there. What you can do to check that is measure the temperatures in your supply trunk and your return. If you would like, I actually have a video explaining how to do this as well. I'll put that in the description below. It's supposed to be in a specific range. If it's in that range, that means it's cooling well. If it's outside of that range, you might have an airflow issue, or you might be low on freon. And that's all we had for the inside. Let's go take a look at the outside unit and see what's going on there. Alright, so we're done with the inside, now we're back outside. And before we begin, I just want to go over the condenser unit real quick. So just so you know, the condenser unit is actually a big coil. There's coils that run back and forth here, covered with either these fuzzy fins or straight fins. Sometimes it'll have a grate over it like this to protect it from, lawnmower rocks flying at it and stuff, or sometimes it'll be just open. And if your dog pees on it, a part of it will be rusted out. And the way it works is there's a coil inside of the house on top of the furnace. So the freon goes in a loop. And by the way, about freon, I know it's not freon. The real name is R22. R22 has been phased out. It's already almost gone. They're moving on to R410A, and even that is starting to get phased out. And if you look on your nameplate right here, find the nameplate. It should be on one of the sides of your air conditioner. You got a little sticker that tells you your model and serial. Sometimes if you get lucky, it'll tell you the date of manufacture. Mine does. It's a 1999. If it doesn't, it's pretty easy to find. You can just go on Google and type in how to read the age of my carrier condenser unit, or Goodman, Amana, whatever it is that you have, and you should be able to find the age of your unit that way. And if you want to know the size of your AC condenser unit, the tonnage is in your model number, and it usually starts with a 0. So in my case, right there, it's typically in the middle, 024. It goes by 12s. So 12 would be 1 ton, 24 is 2 ton. If it's 30, that's basically, 2.5 ton, and so forth and so forth. And right here, HCFC 22, that's actually R22. It tells me that I have 5 pounds and 12 ounces factory charge of that refrigerant in this thing. And all your electrical components will generally be wherever your electrical whip from the disconnect comes into. So for example, if you find your disconnect and see where it goes, mine goes right into here. So all my electrical stuff will be either behind this panel or behind this panel on this side. Sometimes some air conditioners will have stuff on the top. And then this here, we have the refrigeration lines. Both of these actually go inside of your house and into the coil that sits on top of your furnace. Optimally, if your AC is working good, this thicker line will be sweating. There will be condensation on it. And this here is the disconnect. The disconnect disables the 220 volts to the unit. So you can pull that plug out. Sometimes it'll be a breaker. Sometimes it'll have fuses in here. And if you flip it upside down, that turns the power off, which is what I did to keep the unit from turning on while I'm talking. And then some people also have a power saver switch, which is from the electrical company. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes that thing malfunctions as well. Ours is from Excel. It's called Saver Switch. And what that does is on peak times when it's really hot, to save energy, the power company actually cycles people. So like every 3 hours or whatever their time limit is, they'll turn your unit off for half an hour and they'll kind of cycle people back and forth. And they give you a perk for that. It's like 10 bucks off a month on your bill or something like that. If you want to know more, you can just call the electric company and find out what they give you in return for that. Two more things I want to point out. One of them is the coils. It's actually sucking air in through the sides and pushing it out the top. Essentially, it's pushing the hot air from your house that the refrigerant absorbed at the coil that's on top of the furnace. I won't get technical. Long story short, the air gets sucked in through the sides, absorbs the hot air from the house, and it blows it out the top, which is another reason why you don't want to have this thing covered while it's running. And since this thing sucks stuff in through the sides, eventually it'll get plugged up, especially if you have a lot of stuff flying around like cottonwood seeds. This thing will be plastered, and that's actually very easy to clean. You can just use a hose to spray that right off. I made a video about that. I'll put that in the description below if you want. You can check that out too. You should clean your coil every now and again, maybe once a year or maybe once every 2 years. And generally the side towards the wall will be the dirtiest. And the other thing I want to point out is the thermostat wire that's coming in from the house. Sometimes mice will chew that up, and if it's bare and it's touching some metal, it can short out and blow that fuse that's inside the furnace. Okay, so we're done with the intro. So let's say your air is working inside and you come outside and nothing is spinning here, and it's not even buzzing or humming or even trying to start. So to begin with, let's just take the electrical panel off and look at the components quick. Okay, so we got the panel off, and just a fair warning, if you're gonna work on the stuff inside of your electrical panel, there is 220 volts in there. So to be safe, turn off the disconnect outside, pull the plug or turn off the breaker. Also go inside and turn off your circuit breaker for the 220 volts going to the condenser unit, and turn your thermostat off, or you can just turn the furnace switch off. But for this first test, I actually want the disconnect in and the power on. Be very careful when you do this. Use a screwdriver with an insulated handle. And if you look at this contactor right here, this here is the contactor. The way this thing works is it has on the sides, you have the coil, which is only 24 volts. That coil is connected to those thermostat wires that come from the furnace. When the thermostat calls for cooling, this little plunger right here, that's a plunger, pulls in, and those contacts meet those metal plates on either end, and that lets the 240 volts through. Once in a while, what will happen is some ants or a ladybug or a box elder bug will get in between those contacts, and when it tries to pull in, it gets stuck because that ladybug or whatever is jammed in between it. In that case, disconnect all power and just pluck that thing out, and you should be good to go. But the first test you want to do is, with the power on, very carefully, press this plunger in and see what happens. When you're doing that, you're basically bypassing the thermostat. So in my case, the compressor turned on and the fan turned on, so we know that both of them do work. And if everything inside is working, like your fan and your thermostat and stuff, this little plunger should be pulled in. If you see that it's pulled in, yet nothing is working, then chances are your capacitor is bad, or you're missing your 240 volts. The capacitor is right here, and I actually have a video of where I show how to replace the capacitor and check it. So if you want to check that out, I'll put it in the description below. Like I said, if your plunger is pulled in, especially if you hear the unit buzzing at times, like it's trying to start, I would start with replacing this capacitor. I'll put a link in the description below of the video of how to replace and check that. If you have an electrical meter, easy way to check this without pressing the plunger or anything is to check for 240 volts that comes in from the disconnect at the two screws on the contactor. And you should have 240 volts. And when that plunger pulls in, then you got the 240 volts going on the other side, and it turns on the fan and the compressor. If you don't have 240 volts, or if you don't have a meter to check with, generally when you press that plunger in, you should hear something. Even if this capacitor is fully dead, you should hear it humming or trying to start. If you hear nothing at all, then chances are that you do not have 240 volts. So check your disconnect. If there's a breaker here, turn it back on. Also, check in your house breaker panel and check those breakers there as well. If that's tripped, reset that too. And as you can see, last year I already cleaned this. I have a video of how I clean out my condenser unit with just a hose and water. but just in 1 year I already have a ton of cottonwood seed that just plasters my unit. So definitely make sure you clean your coils with some water every year or two. Some people have to do it multiple times in 1 year. And this here is a hard start kit, or a start capacitor with a relay. Most condenser units will not have this. Mine does, and that's only there for the startup when the unit starts. Helps kickstart it, and it's very rare that this thing is bad, so most likely you won't have to deal with it. Sometimes if you get unlucky in your electrical component, you're gonna have a mouse nest, and those little critters, they end up For the time being, let's go ahead and disconnect the disconnect because I don't want this thing running while I'm talking. But as I was saying, sometimes they'll have a mouse nest in here, and the mice, they like to chew up wires. And if you open up your unit and you see a big chunk of insulation and leaves and twigs and whatever, just blow it out with some compressed air, or just put on some gloves and pull everything out. And then investigate for any chewed up wires or broken wires. Just look at them all, and if you see pieces that are chewed off either completely or like more than halfway through, then take and snip those wire pieces off, the ones that are all chewed, and then either use a butt connector or a wire nut to splice those wires back together. A lot of times when your capacitor is bad, it'll be bubbled up right on top, so it's supposed to be flush or straight, but almost every time when I see a bad one, the top tends to bubble up, or if you get unlucky, the whole top pops off and you have the dielectric fluid all over the place. So that's about it for this part. Let's put the panel back on, and I want to touch on the fan and compressor before we go too. Another thing you should check is the condenser fan. What you can do is take a long stick or a screwdriver or some nut driver, stick it in there, and give your fan a push. It should spin relatively freely, like that. If yours is stuck or seized up, then you may need to get a new condenser fan motor, or you can try oiling it up and hopefully that'll last you a long time. So what you gotta do to oil it is take off the caps if you have them. Usually the top grate here is attached to the blower motor. The whole top here is held in by probably like 4 to 8 screws. So you take those screws out, and this top piece should come right off along with the fan. And then you can just flip it right over. And here you got your condenser fan motor and blade. And to oil it, you can get at a hardware store any oil really. I use the Zoom Spot oiler with the spout. It works very slick. You just take the little cap off, and sometimes you'll have oiling ports. They're like a red little plug. Take that out and squirt some in there. If you don't, a lot of times this worked for me, although it's temporary, it tends to seize up again down the road. But just take your spout and angle it down where the shaft goes into the motor, and just oil it real good all the way around and let the oil seep in there. And then you just exercise the fan a little bit. Just keep spinning it until it loosens up. Put it back in there and it should work for you. Now, if that's not helping you, then you're probably gonna have to replace that fan motor. And while you're ordering it or going to buy it, you should probably flip this over. And then if you have some Rust Buster WD-40 or even the oil, squirt some right inside the shaft and the hub here. Because a lot of times this fan will be really stuck onto the shaft and it's hard to pull off. So the more you can lubricate it, the easier it'll be for you to pull it off. And to replace the fan motor, all you gotta do is take the fan blade off. It's usually held in by 1 or 2 locking screws like this. You loosen them up to loosen the hub off of the shaft. And then you flip this thing back over after you pull the fan off. And then you pop the top off if you have a cover. And there should be 4 screws or nuts holding the motor in. All you gotta do is take these 4 nuts off, and of course either have it on its side or on the other side so the motor just doesn't collapse on you. But you take all 4 of these nuts off and the motor will come right off. And the wires right here, they usually have a sleeve or a cover. They go inside of that electrical panel. You can disconnect them, mark where you disconnected them from, and just pull this through. Put the new motor in, put the new wires into that same sleeve, and route them back to where you found them. Generally, if you're replacing a condenser fan motor, it's recommended to replace that capacitor as well. And just briefly about the compressor is a little bit more complicated, more technical, so I don't know if you want to go into that or just call a technician at that point, but let me just show you quickly a little bit. So right here is your compressor. It's a cylinder shaped thing like this, and it usually has a plug where all the wires go into on this side. You take the cover off, either slides up or there's pins, just look at it. Mine slides right up. And don't forget that there could be voltage down there, so make sure your disconnect or breaker is turned off before going down there. This is what most compressor plugs will look like. And sometimes what happens is a mouse will build a nest in there, or just with time, corrosion, one of those connectors, one of those wire connectors on there will burn off or corrode off or get chewed up by a mouse. Sometimes it's something as simple as just checking this, and if there's some broken wire, you clip it off and put on a new connector on there and you should be good to go. And while you have that compressor cover off, if you have an electrical meter and you're suspecting that your compressor is the one not working, so your capacitor is good, your fan is spinning, but you don't hear the rumble or the compressor turning on, one way to check if it's bad or not, if the windings are shorted to the casing of the compressor, if you have an electrical meter, all you gotta do is pull those 3 wires off the connector or the plug down there. Sometimes it'll be a plug or it'll be 3 individual wires. Make sure you remember where you pull them off from. You pull them off, and then using your meter, check for continuity between all 3 pins on the compressor to the casing of the compressor itself. The way I usually do this is I just take and make a little scratch mark on the compressor like this until there's bare metal. One lead I will stick into that metal spot right there. And with those wires disconnected at the plug, I apologize, the camera's hard to get there, so I'm not going to show you. But one lead here, and then check every single pin on that compressor with the wires unplugged and see if there's any continuity to the casing. It should be all OL or open line. There should be no continuity. If there's continuity between any of the pins and the compressor, your compressor is shot. And one last note about the compressor. If you turn it on and everything sounds like it's running, you go outside and your compressor is making just horrendous noises like clang, 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 or it's like super loud, then there's a pretty good chance that your compressor is destroyed and you're just gonna need to either replace the compressor, which is super expensive, or just get a whole new unit altogether, which is what most people do. If you're having problems with freon, what that will usually look like is everything is gonna be running. Your inside and outside units, your compressor you can hear running, your fan's running, the inside fan's running, but it's not cooling the house. Unfortunately, when it comes to freon, you're probably going to have to call a professional, because a jug of like R22 refrigerant, for example, is anywhere from $700 to $1,000, and then you need to have a license to buy it, and you have to have special gauges to put it in. And to top it off, you have to know what you're doing. So hopefully that is not your problem, because that's one of the worst problems to have. And just briefly about freon, some people think it's like gasoline, where it goes low and you have to pour it back in. That's a misconception, and that's not true. Actually, the air conditioner is a sealed system, which means that whatever freon's in there, it stays in there for the life of the unit. You do not have to refill it. If you have to refill the thing, that means you have a leak somewhere in the sealed system. Either in the outside unit here, in the coil inside, or at one of the joints between the pipes from this point to the furnace. And another thing you should know, that most of the time when you have a leak, like 70 or 80% of the time, it's going to be in the coil, which is inside on top of the furnace there, and that coil is like $700 to $800. You cannot fix it, you have to replace the whole coil. So that repair generally becomes very expensive. But just so you know, if somebody were to add freon to your system, by the way, once again, I know it's not freon. The reason most technicians call it freon instead of the real name is because most people, that's how they know it. So anyway, what you would do is take off the caps going to the Schrader valves. There's 2 caps. This is the suction line, this is the discharge line. You will always add freon through the suction line, which is the bigger one. You would take off a hose from your gauges, put it onto that Schrader valve, and then watch the pressures and fill it back up. But like I said earlier, whatever you put in there inevitably will leak back out unless you get that leak repaired. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say about freon. Well guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you were able to get some useful information out of this. I do apologize, I was rushing a little bit as I was going through this, but if you have any other questions about your AC, or if your AC is doing something other I can try to help you out and walk you through it. Just let me know in the comments below. When you ask a question though, the more things you can tell me, the better. What it's doing, what have you tried doing so far? Have you installed anything new lately, like a new thermostat or a whole new furnace or some electronic air cleaner, etc. And if I missed any common fixes that you know of, we would love to hear about those in the comments below as well. I'm sure you would help somebody out. Don't forget to mash that like button on your way out, and we'll see you next time.